Bryce Young has made it official. He's declared for the NFL draft. His final game was a great one. 5 touchdown passes in a win over Kansas State in the Sugar Bowl. He is going in the top 10, maybe top 5, maybe number 1 overall. That's where he went in Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft. Number 1 to the Houston Texans. His teammate Will Anderson, number 3 to the Seahawks, and 3 quarterbacks in the top 10. C.J. Stroud, 5th to the Colts. Will Levis, 7th to the Raiders. All right, Ryan Wilson joins us along with Rick Spielman, who was there on the sideline at the Sugar Bowl. You got to see Bryce Young up close and personal, undersized, but why are NFL scouts not so worried about that?
Because he's an exception to the rule. It's incredible, his vision. It's incredible, his patience. It's incredible, his ability to move and find open receivers down the field. And a guy that size shouldn't be able to do that. But a guy that short never gets the ball batted at the line of scrimmage. And we've been talking, me and Ryan have been talking a couple times, there are so many times that he should have a ball batted, but he knows how to find open windows to throw through. You've seen some of the great throws that he's made all season, the great throws he made in the Sugar Bowl. And the other thing I want to give him kudos for is, unlike some of these other draft prospects, he did not opt out, and he went out there and put a stamp on his college career and made a statement on why he should be the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, that's the one thing that stands out to me, too. He and his teammate, Will Anderson. Ryan, I didn't think either one of those guys would want to play in the Sugar Bowl, a quote-unquote meaningless game.
Yeah, that's a testament as much to these young men's character as Nick Saban as the head coach. And in that sense, Rick has a little Pete Prisco in him. He's old school about wanting to see guys go out there and play, and that's exactly what Bryce Young and Will Anderson and Jahmyr Gibbs did. But look, Rick isn't one to gush over prospects. He's seen enough guys come through to know that you don't want to oversell yourself on a player. And to hear the words that he says about Bryce Young is all you need to know. Is Bryce Young undersized? Absolutely 100%. He's going to weigh less than Russ Wilson or Kyler Murray did at the Combine, but he's also a better player than both those guys coming out, and his body of work speaks to that. And you could even look back at the quarterbacks that preceded him in Tua Tagovailoa and Mac Jones. Those guys were throwing to 2 and 3 and 4 guys who were drafted in the first and second rounds. Bryce had no such luxury, and he still dragged that team through this season and got them to this point. And I thought the game that we saw this weekend was just an exclamation point on his career. Now, look, you could overthink this if you're an NFL team, and I'm sure some will, and not take Bryce Young first overall. I would imagine that team will come to regret it in 2 or 3 years. So if you're the Houston Texans as we sit here, or hopefully not your Chicago Bears, Chris, but if you're the Houston Texans at number 1, take Bryce Young and then concentrate on your next first-round pick, and that's one less thing you have to worry about as you head into next season.
And the other guy, Will Anderson, it's weird how the draft works. He would have been the slam dunk number 1 pick had he been able to come out last
year.
But the rules, in some ways, hurt him. He had to stay another year, and now, more than likely, he's not going to be the number 1 pick. Ryan has him going number 3 overall to the Seahawks.
Not the Bears? Are you happy?
No, he has the Bears passing up on Will Anderson.
Yeah.
Or Jalen Carter.
Yeah, and Will Anderson, when I watched him on the 21 tape, this kid was the most explosive playmaker that Alabama has had come out in the draft on the defensive side of the ball. He's long, he's athletic, he can rush the passer. He can even drop in coverage because he does have athletic ability, and to do that, he's going to fit in any scheme. He's going to fit in an even front. He's going to fit in an odd front. He's just a game wrecker on the defensive side of the ball. The reason I agree with Ryan a little bit is Carter going ahead of him, even though they're both phenomenal players. It's a lot harder to find an inside pass rusher that can dominate like Carter than it is a Will Anderson, although he is pretty unique as an edge pass rusher.
Sure.
And Rich, Rick, you've said it before. Anderson is a great young man, so you're not only getting a fantastic football player, you're getting someone who comes into the program, and you heard him say this during the press conference earlier today announcing that he was leaving for the NFL, that he takes family very seriously, and he takes his football very seriously, and that showed up. Now, look, you could argue that he wasn't nearly as explosive or productive this year as he was last year. That's what happens when you see double and triple teams sometimes. I'm not worried about Will Anderson, the football player. A year ago, the conversation, Chris, and we had this conversation at the Super Bowl with Kayvon Thibodeau, was whether he took football seriously enough. And you could still have that conversation, I would imagine, after the Snow Angel celebration yesterday. There are no such concerns with Will Anderson. He's going to come in day one and be a contributor. He's going to be at the point where he's going to dominate probably early in his rookie campaign. But I liken him in much the same way to Aiden Hutchinson and Chase Young and Nick Bosa. When those young men were coming out, if you were a general manager, there are very few concerns about taking them near the top of the draft. And I think Will Anderson has a chance to be that type of impact player when he gets to the next level. And he should be, without question, a top 5 pick unless we have a long run on quarterbacks at the very top of this draft.
And speaking of quarterbacks, the second quarterback off the board in Ryan's latest mock, C.J. Stroud, number 5 to the Colts. Ryan, how much did Stroud do for his draft stock in albeit a losing effort, but a great individual performance in that semifinal?
Right, and you wonder how much Ohio State would have lost by had C.J. Stroud not played in that game. Again, that goes to Rick's point about players playing in big games and doing themselves favors, and that's exactly what C.J. Stroud did. And Rick and I have talked about Stroud on the podcast before, and the concern that both of us had was he's not nearly as athletic with his feet as Justin Fields, and you could say, well, no one is, but he did most of his damage inside the pocket. We saw in that game this weekend what he was able to do outside the pocket against arguably the best defense in college football. And that opened some eyes. Interestingly enough, I had a scout tell me before the game, C.J. Stroud is actually a really good athlete. We just haven't seen it. And lo and behold, now we've all seen it. And here's where I'm at on this, Rick. I know NFL teams love Will Levis because of his size and his mental makeup. C.J. Stroud is my QB2 right now, and it's going to be hard for me to get pushed off of that based on what I've seen over the course of the 2022 season from both these players.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is if Bryce Young did not play and C.J. Stroud did the performance he did on national TV, would have C.J. Stroud potentially have jumped Bryce Young?
Yeah.
Because then you would say, well, what's my last look on Bryce Young compared to my last look on C.J. Stroud? And I agree with Ryan 100%. When you break him down, there's no question about his arm talent. He's a better pure thrower than Justin Fields was, but you really ever saw him make plays with his legs. And in this game, for whatever reason, someone unleashed him and said, go ahead and do something to make plays with your legs as well. You're too good of an athlete not to. And you've seen the potential. And if we would have seen this all year or over the past 2 years, he may be definitely the number 1 QB coming out in this year's draft.
Yeah, if he did that against Michigan the last game of the season, he would have been the Heisman Trophy winner as well. You mentioned Will Levis, Ryan, and this is a guy that was not great for Kentucky this season, an offense that sputtered all season. Rick, why do scouts think that his game is actually going to be better suited for the NFL than in college?
Everybody's going to make this comparison. It's been talking to Josh Allen. And we talked about it, and me and Ryan talked about it as well. He's big, he's athletic, he's got a bazooka for an arm. He can make every NFL throw that he needs to make. Now, he didn't have the supporting cast around him that he had the year before. He didn't have a very good offensive line, but he also didn't play very well. When you break him down on this year's tape, he's still making the mistakes and still throwing the interceptions that you can't do at the NFL. But some coach is going to say, this kid's a big athletic kid with a bazooka for an arm that is a smart football player, and we can get it out of him if we get an opportunity to work with him.
And Ryan, you think it might be the Raiders who are clearly looking to move on from Derek Carr?
That's right, and just the old school Raiders mentality of taking the best athlete. Will Levis checks a lot of those boxes. The other thing is that when I talk to teams, they say go back and look at 2021 because, as Rick mentioned, a lot changed in 2022 schematically, offensive coordinator-wise, health-wise for Will Levis in that Kentucky group. And I also had someone in the league say to me, look, how many quarterbacks in the NFL look like Will Levis? The answer is a lot of them. How many look like Bryce Young? The answer is no one. And that's also how some NFL teams feel about Will Levis, especially when compared to the Alabama standout in Bryce Young.
All right, so 3 quarterbacks taken in the top 7 of Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft. You can see the whole thing on CBSSports.com and get much more draft talk on a brand new episode of With the First Pick, our brand new podcast with Ryan and Rick. They are heading into the podcast studio to record a new one right now.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.